So it is Wednesday night, 6 o'clock. It is Real Unfiltered Talk with James Bryant and world champion angler Dion Hibden. Good evening, Dion. How you doing tonight?
I am doing wonderful.
All right.
Glad to be here.
All right. I'm going to check this a little here. Let's get this transitioned over and get rid of that screen. I still had our flashcards going there.
Oh, yeah.
We got some new stuff to talk about tonight. First of all, as we always start out, how was your week, man?
Oh, it's been good.
Has it been good?
Yeah, I've got to fish a couple days. Golfed one day. I mean, everything's going good.
Just one day?
Just one day.
All right. Well, I guess that's okay.
Fish 2 days, golf one day. If I can keep that ratio up, I like that a lot better.
I hear you.
Not that I don't like golf, but
Let's see here.
don't like golf. But
Well, I thought you liked golf.
but I
actually.
have to play a little bit. My oldest son plays a lot, so I have to play just so I can, so Thanksgiving goes easier.
Gotcha. All right. Which he hasn't called tonight.
Which he hasn't called, but I'm waiting on it.
Yeah, I always wait for
I
it.
muted my phone
I
because
thought-
he
I-
normally calls about 10 minutes into the show.
I thought your buddy Don would call tonight, and I told him he couldn't call because
Oh, great.
we'd be talking tonight. So he called you earlier, apparently.
Yeah. Yep, I
So-
did. I talked to him.
All right, it's all good. I think I got everything going, and I think it sounds okay. We've got our small talk out of the way.
I look like a hero to him. We talked about catching them, and
All right, Amy's watching. Amy,
He called.
is the sound okay? Let us know. So big news tonight. Got bad news.
oh,
Number
no.
one, my bourbon drinking days on the air are over.
Oh, well,
Because we have bigger news for that.
yeah,
Second of all, we can't cuss anymore.
yeah.
So probably a
that's
good
okay.
thing. But that's
Yeah.
probably a good thing. Like to welcome KRMS Channel TV 32 is now on board.
That's nice.
So that's kind of
Very
cool.
nice.
So here we
That's
are.
right.
If they got it on right tonight,
Yeah,
we don't know. We'll find out because it's a first time for all of us. And if anybody's followed the show, the first, I don't know, I think it was our 11th actual episode we could air because the other 18 of them, the sound was so bad we couldn't get it going. So, we're getting there.
surely one of them was
We're
good.
getting there. Like I said, with our $49 audio budget, we're getting it going now, so it's pretty good. Like to thank all the guys for showing up tonight.
Absolutely.
We're a little low. Where's our guys?
Couple of guys missing.
Got some new guys,
Two or
but all the
three.
old guys are gone, so
Yeah.
we have to get
Got
everybody
some-
on the same damn page. This
Got
is
some
not,
new blood though. I mean,
not good. Not good. So yeah, so we're on TV now. How about that?
that's pretty special.
So you guys can watch it on krmstv.com, I believe. Or actually, I know this is kind of old school, but I was kind of excited. You can actually watch this on an antenna.
that's nice.
No more streaming. So you could go there and, the guy was giving me. So Sean Kowal, he's watched our show a few times, and he called and says, "Hey, I'd like to put you on the air." And I said, let me talk to you. And we talked about it, and thought this is cool. So we'll do that. And he's like, it's super cool. All you have to do is just get your antenna up, or if you have one, hook it up, and these new TVs, you just hit scan, and I think, and they'll correct me later, but they've got like 6 channels. It's like 32 through 37, but you like 32.4, and you get the great one. But anywhere in that ballpark, you can watch the show. So right now, unless we screw it up, we're on Wednesdays live at 6 on
There you go.
KMRS TV. So how
There you
about that?
go.
So you
That'll
fished
be
yesterday.
exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I fished yesterday. Yeah.
Actually, I kind of am a little excited.
Yeah, I am too.
I always wanted to be a TV star.
Yeah.
So that's why I put you on.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
now I can
I'm
fake
kind of
it.
excited about it too. Hearing about it last week, I've been excited, fired up all week long.
Yeah, so thanks for the opportunity, Sean. Everybody at KRMS. We'll see what happens there.
Yeah.
And we're gonna have some KRMS people on. Look at, I
Cool.
put my notes on a meat plate
There you
this
go.
week. It's kind of cool, right?
We're high tech at this place.
That's how we do it. I was too lazy to walk across the door and get a piece of paper because you were talking before, and I'm like, okay, make a note.
The office is way over there.
It's a
Yeah,
long walk.
yeah,
100 feet's a long walk from me anymore. I'm getting
yeah.
old.
Yes, I agree.
Getting old. So you fished last week.
I did. I fished yesterday actually.
What'd you?
It was actually a little bit slow, but like I was telling the guys here in the shop this afternoon, I think some of them are finally getting fed up a little bit. They're getting full,
Not fed up as we're done with all of
No,
this.
no,
Fed up
just-
like we're getting
just-
full.
fed up looking like me, round and
So all
they-
the fish have dad bods.
Yes, they're getting that away. They're getting that away. Most of the decent ones we caught yesterday are just beautiful. They're full and when that takes place this time of the year, then they start feeding, just periodically. They don't feed all day long.
Right.
Where like in the last week or so, with them being really post-spawn, a lot of the fish have been feeding all day long. Anytime the current ran, they were feeding. Yesterday they actually pulled, uh, you know, 30,000, most of the day. And the fish, like I say, we had two or three little 30-minute windows where they bit pretty good, and the rest of the time it was, you could see them standing around, but they weren't biting too good. So,
Well,
and
it
like I
was
say, and then when you catch a big one and it's, a little butterball, this time of the year, that means he's eating good. He's full of shad, and so he's probably not going to eat 24/7 when he gets that away.
got a lot of breaking down all this stuff.
Yeah.
First of all, if you've never watched Real Unfiltered Talk before, welcome on board. And so we can get everybody caught up a little bit. And I always say this, and I forget, we were talking about fishing our home lake, which is right here at the Lake of the Ozarks. And we're happy to sit right here at Bryant's Osage Outdoors. We're in Laurie, Missouri, which is about in the middle of the lake.
Yeah.
So you can go either way, which is cool, if you're driving. So what we're talking about, and as we talked in the last weeks, if you want to get caught up or not, is, how's the fishing on the lake? We always start this way, Lake of the Ozarks, which we're biased. It's one of the best in the world. Country, however you want to frame it out. But a lot of things have happened. We've had a lot of rain, and the lake levels are up. We haven't had any bacteria or disease or anything, so these fish are remarkably healthy. They look really, really good. We talked about the spawn. We've talked about post-spawn. A lot of discussion this week, between last week and this week's show, is shad spawn. We didn't talk about it much, but it's my understanding from what the anglers have been telling me is that the spawn had started pretty much 10, 12 days ago, and it's starting to wind down now.
The shad spawn's kind of getting done. I haven't. We're not seeing that right now, or I haven't been. Now, mind you, yesterday we didn't get out real early, and shad spawn stuff, you've got to get at it early. I mean, daylight till 8 o'clock is when you're going to catch them doing that. And like I say, and then those shad kind of back away from the bank a little bit. But I think the bulk of that's getting over with. They started that really, really hard up to 3 weeks ago. Even before the bass, some of the bass were done spawning. The shad spawn got going pretty hard, and the shad just covered the banks, and like I say, so I think a lot of that's getting done.
Yep.
I think the bulk of that's over with. Yep. Personally.
Got to pat you on the back a little bit. We probably have more positive comments this last week than we've had our entire first season about how much information we actually put out there. People are very grateful for what you gave them. So thank you for that. That is your job, by the way, and you know that.
So, yeah, that is my job.
So don't let me down today, all right? Whatever you do.
I'm not the...
Because I can't make up stuff as good as you can. So, and that's the other thing. If you guys are first-timers here,
I'm kind of
listen
the
closely,
straight man out of this show.
But there's nothing here that... I guess, what was the line? It's up to you to decide if it's true or not.
That's right.
So we'll tell you all kinds of stories, but you have to decide what's actually the truth or not. So, but that was true stuff. Last week it was really good. So, kind of what I wanted to ask you a little bit. And tonight, guys, thank you all for tuning in and watching. If you have a question you want to yell out tonight, we'll address it. We'll answer your questions. I think we'd like to do this maybe once a month.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
And we'll answer any questions you've got. So if you're watching us live, if you're out there in the crowd and you got something you want to say, give us a shout. And we'll sure talk about it tonight because tonight is the night.
Well, I think we have to, a little bit, now that we're getting a little bit of a following, and if people are taking the time to call in and send us messages, I think we'll answer some of them.
I think they also understand that they do now understand that nothing's out of bounds with our show.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
I mean, we have talked about some pretty bad things.
We will talk about it, or we will avoid it like the plague.
We've talked about the right and wrong way to go to the bathroom in a boat, all the way to spawning fish. So we've got it covered well. So don't be ashamed if you think it's a dumb question, because we ask each other dumb questions on a daily basis. Yes. So it's all good. So mine is shad spawn, because that's where I was leading you into.
Gotcha.
Is there a way to actually fish for bass, like a method during the shad spawn? And the reason I asked that is last week we talked about summer fishing, and we talked about fishing on brush and around brush and main lake points and good hiding spots, but nobody's really said, if the shad are spawning, this is what I would go and do. I mean, is that even a conversation that we even need to have?
Sure, absolutely. If you can get out there early.
I got to start first. I got to cut you off. How does one know when the shad are spawning? Because I do not know.
Well, when you get out there right at daylight, and when I say right at daylight, the even before daylight, they kind of sense it somehow, and they just go to the bank and they chase each other down the bank. And like I say, it's an actual shad spawn, and they get right up there in 6 inches of water, right on the bank, and they flicker on the right on the bank. It's like seeing a school of shad. You
Small
know,
number.
oh no, they're everywhere. When they're really doing it, you can find them about anywhere you look. Um, but when that happens, it happens for a brief period of time while the light is low in the mornings. Like I say, about the first hour of daylight is when you really the fish pull in there and feed on them, and you thrive on them. It's not hard to find when it's happening. You just, like I say, start early one day and any rocky bank, it doesn't even have to be rocky banks. What am I saying? It really doesn't matter. They get
Right.
on every kind of bank, but they just get right on the shoreline, and you have to throw something accordingly. Either like I throw a fluke a lot, a fluke type lure. Most of the time it's Texas rig, no weight in it, and that's because I can actually throw it out on the bank and work it into the water without spooking them right on the edge of the lake. You can throw top waters and catch them. A lot of people throw a jig, a swimming jig. It's a good time to do that. And you get a lot of reaction bites. You throw it in there, and the shad are wanting to stay that close to the bank. They want to stay real close to that shoreline as they're doing their deal. And you throw something into them, and you come twitching it out, and it's like any other predatory response to a bass. That one single one comes out by itself, and that's when he attacks, and that's what your lure looks like when that's happening. And like I say, I do it a couple different ways. A lot of times I throw a swimming jig, which is just a little white, about a 3/8 ounce jig with a swimming type trailer on it. But it's basically to mimic a shad. Or I throw a swim bait. My swim bait's going to be Texas rigged, something that I can throw out on the rocks and pull it in the water, because you don't really want the shad running and spooking, because if you spook them and they run everywhere, then you've kind of ruined your little bite window there, because they scatter out. When they scatter out, the fish starts plucking them off. You want your lure to be the one to do that, to leave the crowd, because that's the one he's going to bite, is the one that leaves the crowd, and so if you throw in there and you splash down right in the middle of them, you're scattering the shad with your lure. And like I say, then you got to compete with live animals to fool him with your bait. I would rather throw it out on the bank, don't spook them, pull it in, and let my bait be the first thing they see leaving the bank.
Gotcha.
And that's how I chase them. And like I say, white type stuff, because they're totally eating shad when that's taking place in the mornings. So everything you're going to throw is going to be, shad colored of some orientation. And like I say, that's my opinion of it. That's how I do it. But once the sun gets up, once the sun gets on the water, you can prolong it some by fishing the shady banks. They'll stay on the banks where there's some shade. So sometimes you can do it a little bit, hour or two longer. Really though, if the shad are spawning and you don't have them in the first 30 minutes, you better go change and go do something else anyways, because you're doing it wrong.
Gotcha.
Because they're biting. When that's happening, they're biting.
Well, I wrote on my meat plate, my styrofoam tray. Listen to you talk. I wrote down 3 words: white, weightless fluke.
There you go. And that's just one of my preferences.
Did you mention that?
Yes.
Dang it! I didn't hear you say that. That's what. Okay.
It's not screwed up. Also,
Well, I have it.
you got a lot of leaves and floating debris in the water. That's another good way to throw your bait in there, and it's not got something hanging on it when you pull it off the bank, or you pull it through that first little bit of grassy type floating stuff that's floating in the lake because the water's up now. So you need to keep that in mind. Efficient cast, making a good cast and your lure looking good to the fish when he finds it. That's as important as anything. If it's got a leaf hanging over it, he's probably not going to bite it. He's probably not. I don't.
Over the water, you mean?
Yeah, in the water.
Floating.
Yes, floating
Okay.
stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Because you said leave hanging over.
Well,
I was thinking about hanging like from a
no,
branch.
no. That means you made a bad cast.
That I do.
And it happens. I
That
agree.
I definitely
I'm
do.
hung in a tree a
That's
lot.
why I never use braid.
Me too.
I can hang. Well, I use it on top water, but man, you hang it in there, you might as well just cut 80 feet of braid off.
Yeah.
It's not coming out, no matter what.
But that's my opinion of a shad spawn.
So I want to talk about a fluke for a minute because you made me think about it. Have you ever? So those who don't even know what a fluke is, and I'm just going to use Zoom as an example. Zoom makes a fluke. I think they weren't really the inventor of a fluke, were they?
No, Bass Assassin, I think,
Bass
was the first.
Assassin or Finesse had some way back when.
Finesse fish. Yep.
Yep, they had some cool ones, but Zoom makes a fluke, and it's basically it's a minnow body and has a fork tail.
Yep.
It's the best way to explain it. And I'm sorry I didn't have the graphics put on.
Looks
online,
like a little shad.
And if somebody's confused, you can just email me at askrealtalk@gmail.com, and I'll show you some pictures to tell you. But
yeah, you can look up fluke on the internet.
You can look it up. You can Google it, or you can ask AI, and they'll tell you everything about it. You never need to know.
That's right.
But in that particular bait, there is like, I don't know, I call them flaps. These flies are thick in here today. And so if you rig it like with a Texas rig hook, and you rig it like you would a worm, you can hook it up into those flaps. It's like a little crevice there you can open up.
Yeah.
So it's like it's not hollow, but it's like two halves.
Better hook ratio.
Hard to explain.
Yeah.
I learned once that you rig it upside down the other way. You ever done that?
I've seen
where the
people
hook
do
comes out of the flap and you twitch it, it'll actually dart to the surface like a wounded fish.
Yeah.
And I was thinking to myself, man, this would be something this time of year might be a good idea to do.
That flat side
will dart up instead of darting down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're twitching around, and we're talking about fishing one weightless. I'm talking about fishing one weightless. I always and I learned it at Pickwick Lake, which is it's a river.
Yeah.
You know, we had ran way back in a creek, and you fished it a lot. So I'm not telling anything you don't know. But for those that have never been to Pickwick, it's a river. It's got a bunch of stumps and islands, and it's kind of gnarly. But there's a spot. You go a little bit down from the dam, and you hang a left, and there's actually a steam plant that goes back in there. And an angler up there taught me once you go back there and you can twitch. They would take a white fluke and put a red dye on the tails, just give it a little bit of color, and they flip them upside down so they dart to the surface in that shallower water. And it was pretty successful on smallmouth bite. Yeah. Problem is that all I caught were like those 20 and 30 pound stripers, and I got so involved in it that it's so much fun that you forget that you're fishing a tournament. You back up and go.
Wait a minute, I can't weigh these in.
Yeah, but that's a whole other story for another day. But yeah, I think there's different methods you can non-traditionally fish that will work this time of year in shallow water, and that's one of them.
Yeah.
What do you got?
There's guys. I was down at.
This is paid play, whatever. I gave you one. You give me one.
I went to Lake DeGray one time with a buddy of mine. I was down there at Lake Ouachita, and he says, "Man, they're biting over on DeGray. Let's go this afternoon." And I was actually practicing for another tournament, and I said, "Okay, maybe right before dark." Which I had my sons with me, and they were young, and it sounded like a good time for them to go catch a bunch of fish. So we went over there, and they take a regular size fluke down there. And then they put a 1/0 EWG style hook in it, which is it's a little tiny hook. Normally I throw like a 4/0 in my fluke 99% of the time.
A worm hook.
Yeah, a 4/0 worm hook, a bigger worm hook.
Wide gap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
same here.
And he's got these rods rigged up for my sons and stuff, and they got these little tiny hooks on them. I'm like, wow, are we going to throw little bitty flukes or whatever? And he pulls out 100 bag of full-size flukes. And I'm like, dude, shouldn't we put on a bigger hook? And he's like, yeah, you do that. And that's all he said. And I thought, well, okay, there you go. And sure enough, I had like a 4/0 EWG tied on my rod. And we get out there, and he's got my sons. He said, here, just pick up that rod. And one of my boys picks up the rod. And those fish come up kind of schooling on the surface, and they could throw their fluke out there, and with that little tiny hook in it, it stayed right on the surface. I mean, you could see it the whole time. They're twitching and bobbing and I mean, just crushing them fish. I'd throw mine out there in the same places, and I would try to make it stay up. But just the weight of that hook made all the difference in the world. And they swear and be damned, it makes all the difference in the world.
Problem is, it's really, I guess I have all these questions. With using spinning tackle,
They were using spinning
I
tackle,
say
yes.
because you can't fish that way with a bait caster.
No,
You know,
no.
you number one, you can't cast it because there's no
Yeah.
weight, and then if you do, you have to scale it down to such small line. I think you'd have some breakage issues.
But it kind of showed me, anytime I'm out there fishing and I'm seeing a few more of them on the surface, I'll go down to like a 2/0. Not necessarily that big 4 or 5/0 that you would normally throw on a fluke. I go down to like a 2/0.
Yeah.
And it just that little tiny bit of weight
I,
makes a huge difference on how high in the water column it
yeah, I
works.
gotcha.
Okay?
We're gonna get into all
See
kinds of
there?
water column stories today. For those who've just tuned in for the first time, we don't talk about the water column. So, so yeah, yeah, it's some crazy stuff. Um, I've seen people take like a drop shot hook and just skin tip through the nose of
Sure.
a bait and do the same thing. You know, but that on a myriad of baits. Myriad.
You-
That's my big word
That's
today.
there's a good word.
Myriad.
The thing of it was there for a while. I think it was Bill Dance had the banjo minnow,
Yeah.
and he throwed several different lures on his
Banjo
banjo minnow, and he swore by it. And Dad's like, "It's the hook.
It's the hook.
It's the way you hook them, and that's why they zigzag and wiggle around so much better. It's because everything was nose hooked.
Man.
The hooks that they sent with them were nose hooks. They had a little rubber band that slipped over the hook.
Yep.
But what it does is it keeps everything loose. You're not restricting your lure by running a hook through the middle of it and stiffening it up. So everything worked better and had more action to it.
I think next week we need to pull some vintage stuff out
We could.
because you know where this is going, right?
I
Flying
still
lure?
carry flying
Flying
lures
lure
in my
Yeah.
boat.
The way but that hook is so unique that we have to have visual.
Absolutely.
You cannot explain a flying
No.
lure hook. There's no way.
No, you
Not
can't.
a chance. So back to here at Lake of the Ozarks. We talked about some stuff off the air, and we're going to have some questions coming in. We have one or two here that we need to get to. But we have seen this year, and probably on lakes all over the country through the Midwest, the amount of water and rain that we get provides a lot of current flow.
Yeah.
And with current flow comes a change in how fish behave, how they eat, how they perform. A question that is out there is, we had, and the actual question is, how long will this incredible current bite last? It seems the current will run for several weeks. Will the fish continue to stay out there? And I have my theory on it, but I'm gonna let you have at it. We talk about it a little bit on a current bite.
This happened to us about 10 years ago. And when I say that, the exact same scenario happened. We'd went through a pretty dry season the year before, and then the next year it started raining in May, and it just kept right on raining, kept right on raining. The lakes came up, lots of current started coming through the lake, and what it did is it prolongs the shallow bite longer into the season. Instead of it lasting, through the month of June, now it lasts on up into July and stuff like that. But my dad told me, he said, that's all fine, well, and good. He said, enjoy yourself right now. He said, because wait till it stops. He says, because when it stops, he says, now you got to relocate them. You got to figure out how to catch them again. He said, because it changes, it's going to change everything. It's going to do the same thing this year. It's going to keep flowing. Like right now, I saw a little bit of it yesterday.
Right.
Yesterday we went out, we didn't catch as many bass, but the bass that we did catch were really, really healthy. They're caught up.
Right.
They're getting full. Well, once a bass gets his belly full, he's not like me, he just doesn't continue eating, okay? He slows down. And now
Is that called foundered?
Foundered, yes,
Foundered.
right.
Yeah, he's got foundered.
Bass don't do that. Bass go out there and eat till they're full, and then they quit for a little bit. Well, guess what? When he's not eating, period. You can't make him bite sometimes. And we experienced that some yesterday. Because, and the reason I know this is because of that nasty word, live scope.
Right.
We saw a bunch of fish that we could not make bite. And then when you would accidentally make one bite, you bring him in and it's beautiful. I mean, it looks like almost looks like they were spawning. They're so fat, and it's because they're so full of
They're
shad.
gorged.
They're gorged, and so like I say, it's got its goods and it's got its bads. The fish are really in good shape and they're beautiful and they're full, but that also means they're only going to feed a few hours a day.
Right.
You know, they're going to feed for little bite frames, little bite windows for a couple of hours, and then they're done for the day. You know, and they're going to wait till they throw up that shad and need another one, or or wait till that kind of goes away and they get hungry again. So it's kind of good, but it also, once they get kind of fed up, it can be kind of fickle.
Yeah. So onto that, to follow up with another question, and I know you prefer jigs in this scenario, right?
I like slower moving lures. Yeah.
Slower. So is there another bait out there? I mean, is the big worm and the jig, is that best for a current bite? You know,
Uh, it depends. If they're in the act of feeding, no, you probably need to throw something shad oriented. And when I
shaggy.
say that, I'm talking a swim bait,
Yep.
maybe a crankbait. Some. I don't like crankbaits because I don't like treble hooks. They're bad about getting in your skin and stuff like that.
You put them in the water, not in your flesh.
Yeah, well,
It's not
when I'm trying to get a hold of a 6 pounder,
and
I don't
that's-
want all that stuff in his face
Let's be clear, they're fun to fish with until you have fish in the boat.
until you have a fish in the
Because
boat. Yes,
they always want to jump the moment you reach for that hook.
Yes.
Every time. Yeah. No, I
But-
get that. That's kind of a
but
fishing phobia.
but it's
isn't
not
it?
that I don't like crankbaits. It's not my favorite deal.
I would
would
think
rather.
the square bill bite would be amazing right now.
It is probably up the lake, the
Mm-hmm.
upper portions of the lake. Where I fish is on the low end of the lake. It's closest to my house, so that's where I fish the
Deeper,
bulk of the
clear,
time.
cleaner water.
Yes, but if I was putting in at the Hurricane Deck Bridge and going up, it would probably be 90% of it be a
So
square lip.
let's break this down. If somebody's not fishing this lake, what we're talking about is that if you're fishing a lake that's clear, you have probably 4 or 5 foot visibility. It's got deep sheer banks. It's got a deep channel. Then yes, that's A. If you fish a river system where it's narrower, water typically is dirtier, and you have more current flow defined to a channel, not a lot of off ramps. What I call
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes,
I always
absolutely.
I always made reference to the channel like a highway.
Yep.
And when you pull off in the cove, that's kind of your off ramp. And you have there was an old buddy of mine used to say that you got to think about it in terms of fast food. Um, you're traveling down, you're on vacation, you got your family and kids, and they're all hungry, and you pull off. What's the first thing you see? It's always McDonald's. They always put McDonald's in the off ramp. Well, McDonald's are shad.
That's right.
But
On a point.
on a point. That's the quickest off ramp
That's right.
to get your cheeseburger and get back on the
That's
road.
right.
That's how kind of bass behave. It's not the best analogy, but it's kind of close.
It's
Now-
a very good one.
Now, the big steakhouses, they're further on down the road.
That's right.
What's a steak? It's a crawdad, right?
Yep.
Crawdads typically don't hang out on that main in the current and the points. They're out there,
Yeah.
but they're hard to get out there to feed
They're
on. But
they're
you get
not they're not as exposed.
right. So you get back around the corner a little bit off the main off ramp, find you a good steakhouse. Well, what's the steakhouse? That's
Yeah.
that good rocky bank that's protected off the current a little bit. It's
Or-
close enough for an ambush spot.
Or a good
And-
piece of brush.
Yeah,
you
and,
know?
and last week we talked about it. And every point's got a sweet spot.
Yep.
And what that is, we can't tell you definitively what the sweet spot is. But you go explore a point, you're going to see that little niche, little cut in, maybe a piece of brush that's on the backside, maybe it's on the other side. But that magic spot holds those fish, and typically every point has one.
Yeah. I mean, right now, the sweet spot on points and stuff is a current break. It's something to break the current a
Okay.
little bit. That might not be when the current's not flowing. That might not be the sweet spot at all. But right now, with the steady current flowing through the lake, let's just say 4 out of the 7 days of the week, there's current flow through the lake right now.
Okay.
And so the sweet spots on those places normally are something that's a little bit taller off of the bottom than everywhere else. So when you're idling along with your depth finders, your side imaging and stuff, and you see, something jagged looking that has a shadow, uh, and this is pretty high tech. But when if you're looking at side imagery and you see something on it, and if it has a black spot behind it, that means it's fairly tall off the bottom because it has created shadow.
Shadow, yeah.
And so therefore, that's what I'm hunting for right now. And because that makes a better current break. If it sits up off the bottom, that's something for that fish, those shad, to pull in behind so the current will flow around them. And the taller it is, better it is right now, So that's the sweet spots for me right this minute.
So you and I are notorious about talking about putting in structure immediately, and you just said the taller the better. So my mind instinctively goes is how can I put something out there quick to make the fish, to create my own sweet spot, as you will. Does that make sense?
Sure.
And I'm thinking the first thing on my mind is hop out of the boat. Don't tear your boat up, of course, but hop out of the boat, find some big chunk rocks, and make your rock pile out there.
It's not a bad way to go. Every time I see one of these big barges hauling that riprap going down the lake, I'm thinking, man, if I could just dump that out.
Just push them off, yeah.
If I could just tip that over there where that's at.
And I know 3 big rocks different than 3,000 big rocks.
Yeah, but it's still, every little bit helps.
But I think a way to kind of break it down and look at it is like if you go to any major river, Mississippi, Missouri, Chattahoochee, they have what do they call them? Wing dams.
Yeah.
And that's to prevent erosion, of course. But that's kind of what we're talking about.
It's a pile of rocks.
It's kind of what we're talking about. Did you ever catch any of those off Red River? Anything like that?
Absolutely.
On the backside of those wing dams?
Absolutely, yeah. Get a little current flowing through one of them.
Crashed into one. I never caught any fish off of it, but yeah, that's a whole other story.
The thing of it is, there's a lot of really, really good bottom contour on Lake of the Ozarks. Tons and tons of good rock ledges.
And on any lake.
On most lakes, yes. But there's also a lot of really bare points. I mean, just nothing on them. They're just big, flat, sandy, gravelly, bald points.
Long, shallow.
That's right.
Nothing boring. Yeah.
And right this minute, you're not going to catch a ton off of those points because there's no current breaks. Right. There's nothing to break that current off of it. And you just have to think about that when you're out there looking for them and chasing them.
So maybe an irregular point.
An irregular
one that's got a hook in it, or
something that's got something
to
make.
It's a straight out point, or
I
would a dock work?
I talked about it.
A point would that help any?
Well, it's a current break. Absolutely.
I mean, a little bit, but I mean,
if they're
not
up shallow,
deeper,
yeah. If they're up high in the water column, absolutely a dock will work.
Oh my gosh.
Because the current, it's a current break. It's just breaking around the styrofoam of that dock.
I will say this, not to get into the whole water column conversation, but a boat lift that is down in the water on a point.
2 giant logs.
Yeah, that's the same as same thing.
2 giant logs laying in the water. Yeah.
Yep. I'm breaking this down for the first time.
You're thinking about you sinking your dad's hoist out in front of his dock by accident.
I may have known some people that have done that,
yeah.
but I'm not going to take any credit for that whatsoever because I think that's pretty illegal.
By the way, my son's already found that. I'm pretty sure.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
not at all.
Yeah.
There was. I'll tell you a story. It was the coolest thing, and this was back. Gosh, we were 24, probably like 2001, somewhere in there. And you'll know the point, and we're going to talk in terms that nobody else can understand. But there used to be a restaurant on the Lake of the Ozarks called the Penguin.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yep.
Okay, so like a couple coves up from it, and it might have been in front of Cartwright. Either way, there was a cruiser that sank. You remember that?
Yep.
And every year I go back up there and look at it on my graph because back in 2000 we had grayscale, and when we got it wasn't even side imagery back then, but it was like just high detail.
Yeah.
I could see the boat. It was like the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. It's like I could see a boat, and you could fish it. Well, every year it would break down, and to the very end, all I saw were 2 big hunks, and it was the engines. And those fish would hold the engines better than they held on the boat.
It
was crazy.
Lawson, one of his best nighttime spots last year is one of those big 30-foot tunnel hull Scarab with two big outboards
Just
on it.
skip it back in between
and
the holes.
and it is 30 foot deep under a boat dock. And I'm like, he said, let's go fish the boat. And I'm like, what? I ain't got a clue. I haven't been with him. And we pull up, and he skips back up into this dock, and he said, there's a boat down there. I said,
Underneath it?
Yeah. I said, what do you mean a boat? He said, there's a full-size freaking boat under there. And he says, I'll show you when we leave. And we side imaged it as we left out of there. And it is one of them
Like a cruiser.
or $200,000 go fast boats, and it is laying on the bottom, and you can see those two. I swear to God, you can read Mercury on the side of those motors.
Really?
It is as perfect a drawn picture, and those bass are just huddled up all over it, just all down in there. And it's just something new, it's something different to them,
And I guess the point I'm getting at, it doesn't have to be natural structure.
Oh, no, not at all.
Anything that's going to break it up, that those fish can get into, I always like to say, is an ambush point.
Yes.
Bass got to
Something
hide
to
under
back in.
something, dash out, grab a meal, go back in, get their deal. So, yeah, that's good stuff.
Something for them to hide under and hide around, just something to break it up. I say, I have told it many, many times, the shade, something with a little bit of shade. Now, down deeper, it doesn't make as big a difference. But shade makes a huge difference a lot of times around those boat docks.
Maybe
the shady
not so much in
side.
current, though, right?
No, not so much in current. No,
Right.
current alleviates all of that.
Right, and we'll get let's put a pause on shade for a minute.
Okay.
We'll come back to it. So let's go back, and we're talking about big current when that bite works, when it doesn't work, and like we discussed, there is the bad news. At some point,
It's
it
going
stops
to
flowing.
stop. Yeah.
So there's two levels of thought there. I personally am not a lower lake fisherman. I do not like to fish clear, deep, big water. I like to fish the river.
Sure.
I like to fish river systems. And river bass, which are different than clear water bass, they'll scatter. They just basically scatter. And I said we'll come back and visit the shade. Shade becomes very, very important because, as you're getting ready to say, shade is a natural cover.
Yeah.
But if it's cloudy, those fish will go everywhere.
They can stand anywhere.
They'll go anywhere, especially in a river system.
Yeah.
Any river system. But if the sun comes out, they go looking for cover. And they'll get tight under shallow stuff. And you can fish a dock with brush on it and not get bit at all. But on the left side, there's a 4-foot strip of shade. They'll be laying in it. And it's the craziest thing I've ever seen. You got it. And so, with that being said, that's where you're probably going with that. But
the first thing you have to focus on, especially around boat docks, the first thing is current. Okay, if there's current, then he's always going to be facing into it, and he's going to be on the leading
facing
edge.
upstream.
He's going to be facing upstream into the current, and he's going to be on the leading edge of that dock. Whatever the current hits first, that's where he's going to be standing, and he's going to tuck up underneath it. And so when shad flow to him, they flow under that dock, and he's right there to lurch out and get it. If there's no current, then you have wind. Wind is the next in line. Okay, if you got a little bit of breeze blowing, he's going to almost always be where the wind's blowing into it. He's going to be facing into the wind as the wind's blowing into it. If you have neither, it's all about the shade. I mean, so you can basically go, those three things dictate where that fish is going to stand, up the rivers on these lakes. Now, down on the low end, where those fish don't mind getting out there 15, 20 foot deep, that's kind of irrelevant a lot of times. But up the lake, on the upper portion of Lake of the Ozarks, it makes all the difference in the world, you know. And you have guys say, well, I'm gonna go fish the upstream corners of every boat dock on Lake of the Ozarks, and I'm gonna weigh in 20 pounds. And I'm gonna tell you right now, that's a guy who really doesn't know what he's talking about, because I have to go and see what's happening on every boat dock I fish. I have to wait and see, okay, is the current moving? Is the wind blowing? If it's neither one, then I'm going to focus on shady stuff, and you just have to develop that as you go along, and it's going to change through the day. All right, he lives under that boat dock. You just have to figure out which way he's facing. Because, like any other thing, you're better off if your lure comes into his face, comes at him. If it comes on the blind side of him, you're going to have that fish swirl out there. And a lot of times you see that on the front corner of a dock, or bring your bait down the side of a dock, and you'll see a big boil roll up, and you're like, oh, man, he missed it. You came up on his blind side.
Right.
All right? If you come into his face, he won't miss it. He's not dumb. Okay? He's not a bad catch. Let's put it that way. He's extremely good at it.
Yeah.
The only time he misses your lure is when it surprises him. If it surprises him, sometimes he'll miss it. But if it's coming into his face and he's hungry for it, no, he don't miss it. So
is that when you cast it and then your line's just moving before you ever take up the slack?
Oh yeah,
that's the perfect cast.
When you pitch it in there and your line's just it never stops sinking. It's gone.
Right, it's gone.
Know?
Yeah,
and that's because it came.
Right
it floated right into his face. He sucked it in and he just.
Which that's a big problem because it happens to me like all the time.
It does happen.
No,
Yeah,
it doesn't happen to me all the time. I wish that was the case, but that's not the case. So current stops.
Current stops.
And we don't have wind, and we don't have sun, and we don't have anything.
When
we're at the lower end in deep water. How does one start to pattern where those fish go?
Well, on the low end,
and they're foundered.
On the low end, and
is it just time to have a cocktail and go to the house?
Well, it's not a bad thing.
I mean, that's kind of
the days when I prefer to play golf.
There you go.
But anyways, they're still there. Sometimes you just got to kind of fish for a reaction bite, And when I say that, if he's suspended, not eating, there's a lot of times I'll throw something out there and I'll jerk it up through him. I'll if I see a school of fish on my locator or something like that, I'll throw out to him. I'll let my bait get down there to him, and I'll swim it over him once, up over the top of him. If that doesn't create a strike, then the next time I'm going to try to scatter them. I'm going to try to make them move.
Right.
And a lot of times when they're standing there not feeding in a little school, you got to make them move. And when I say that, I'll throw something, I can't really say obscene, but something maybe really, really big at them.
Right.
I've got some spoons that are as big as that cup right there, that I'll throw out there, and it's solely to make them scatter.
Right.
Because when they scatter out of that school, as they go to gather back up into that same little school, I don't know if it's a little buddies or what they are, but when they go to gather back up,
little buddies,
as they're gathering back up, they will eat. They will feed a lot of times. And so I'll throw something out there through them, and I'll jerk that 2 or 3 times, and then I'll pick up whatever I feel like they should bite, something more bite size or the size of the forage that I feel like they're eating, and I'll throw that through there and work it through there real easy like you normally would to make them bite. But you have to make them move. You have to make them do something. If they're standing around, there's lots of times, and a lot of times you see it, especially when they're up dirt shallow. When they're not feeding, there's nothing you can do to make them bite,
Right.
and unless you can make him swim. There's lots of times I see one standing there. If he's standing there and he won't eat nothing, I'll take trolling motor. I'll go in there and I'll chase him, get him moving. And as soon as he starts moving, it's their natural instinct to feed before they stop again. So anytime
you're talking
he's
about clear
swimming,
water, of course,
in clear water,
and finding a cruiser. Yeah.
One of the greatest stories, that my dad ever told me was at Lake Mead. He drawed Bobby Garland. One of the first
the Bobby Garland.
The Bobby Garland. 2 of the best sight fishermen ever walked the planet, and they draw out in a tournament. And he told my dad, Bobby was from out west, and my dad, I'm sitting there, I'm 14 years old, sitting at the registration, and Dad says, I'm gonna draw Bobby Garland tomorrow. And I said, no, you're not. That would just be too crazy. 2 guys that know how to use a spinning rod better than anybody else on the planet, both of you in the same boat. And he said, I feel like I'm going to draw Bobby Garland at some point in time. And I don't know if the tournament director had told him, hey, God, wait till you see who you draw. And, but anyway, he draws Bobby Garland. They go out fishing, and those fish on Lake Mead, water clarity's 30 foot deep. You can see 30 foot deep. And they basically went to the biggest flat on the lake and they chased fish around all day long. And that's where my dad got to understand you have to make a move. When you make a move, their predatory instinct is as soon as they start swimming, they're kind of hunting. They're going to hunt before they stop and find a place to stop. Well, they would find one standing in a salt cedar, and instead of throwing and seeing if he would come out and bite, Bobby would just get on the trolling motor, run it right into the salt cedar, scare him out, and then he'd take off, 3-pounder taking off swimming down the beach. They just kick their trolling motor on and just chase around behind it and throw little tube baits out in front of it until they got one to land right in front of his face, and he'd grab it, and one of them would weigh him in. And like I say, that's just one of those deals. It's a fish's predatory instinct that when he's paddling, he's looking for something to eat. That's just the way they feel. I talk to bass some, I'm just
You're
kidding.
the bass whisperer?
I'm a bass whisperer.
Wow.
No. But
so out of that whole thing, you know what I got
what?
from it to pose a question? And I think maybe everybody else the same thing. What the hell is a salt cedar?
Well, it's like a
Never heard of salt cedar.
It's basically like a tumbleweed. You're in the desert, Lake Mead, Nevada.
Yeah, I've been there.
Well, it's like a tumbleweed.
A floating tumbleweed?
It's a growing
It's
weed.
growing. So it's round?
But
Tumbleweeds
until
are
it starts
kinda round.
tumbling, it's a bush.
So a salt cedar starts out as,
It's a little prickly bush that you don't want to touch.
and then it turns into a tumbleweed
And
when
then
it
it turns
dies and
into a
rolls across the
tumbleweed.
highway.
Yes.
And then the cowboys sing a lonesome song.
That's right.
Got
That's
it.
it.
There you go. Salt cedars or juvenile tumbleweeds.
But ever since then, I would like to say that I remember that from the ripe old age of 14, but no, my dad has had to drum that into my head time and time again over the years. Sometimes you have to make them swim to make them bite, because if they're standing there, they have no intentions most of the time of biting. They are relaxing.
And
It's just the way it is.
we have talked about that a little bit in the past. Crappie guys have been notorious for blowing out schools of fish with the trolling motors.
Sure.
So that's another, with the advancement of technology where you can see those fish, they can turn their trolling motor propeller around backwards underneath the dock and blow them out. And it makes them, if they're stagnant, it makes them move. When they move, they feed.
Yep.
So a lot harder with bass, a lot easier with a schooling fish. I would say that technique would be incredibly good with smallmouth, schooling Kentucky's on the West Coast, or further west, but on this lake, a little more challenging, but nonetheless, it would work. I think. Never tried it with bass.
It's just one of those deals, that you just got to understand a little bit, and is that a good tidbit for John Q. Public to have? Yeah, it really is, because it can make a difference. You see one standing by your dock and he just stands there, pick up a rock. Pick up a rock, throw at him, make him move, make him take off swimming. Because as soon as he takes off swimming, now he's got it on his mind, oh, well, I'm paddling. I might as well find something to eat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've talked about it before. I've always found it fascinating that I've caught really nice bass around swimmers.
Yeah.
And I know that's not kind of the same thing.
Keeps them on edge.
But I think, I always thought they were just curious. I thought it was like, and this sounds really stupid, but, they always say that sharks, when they see people swimming in the water and kicking their feet, it's instinctive of a feeding frenzy, and that's, and no, I'm not thinking 1971 Jaws where that happens, but I think that noise in the water actually invokes a fish to go see what's going on.
I did a couple of those hook and look shows with Kim Stricker where he dives. He's a certified diver, gets down in the water with his camera and films a lot of what you do is you go there and you fish with him.
Right.
And he actually gets in the water, dives down, and tries to video the fish and what you're actually doing. Great concept. What a cool concept. I did it once with him around smallmouth. And when he would get in the water, now this is an apparatus. This camera is big. It's big. And, here he is, full-blown wetsuit, big air tanks and everything, bubbles coming out everywhere. I guarantee you when you're around smallmouth, he wouldn't be in the water 15 seconds. and there's a big one standing there looking at him.
Right.
And he would tell you over the speaker, he's like, hey, looky here. And you got a monitor that you can see everything he's seeing, the camera. And he would take the camera, and most of the time he would have to hold it away from his body and turn around because his smallmouth was standing there staring in his mask, looking at his eyes and shit moving. Now there's bubbles going everywhere out of his mask, but those smallmouth would intentionally come right straight to him. And sometimes the biggest one there, it wasn't like they were pounders. They were big ones, and they were very inquisitive. And I'm a firm believer, you get around a lot of racket and stuff like that, and especially around these boat docks on the lake, and everybody's racket noise.
Gotcha. Sorry.
And you hear people, oh wow, that's too noisy over there, and I'm like, okay, whatever. Let me get in there for just a second, as long as you don't hook a swimmer, that's not a bad spot.
Right.
And I just think it keeps them moving. They're not going to stand right there where somebody ploosh, lands right on them. But I think they're close, and it makes them move around. Just because somebody's swimming on their dock today doesn't mean they don't live there anymore.
Right. Or not still there.
Yeah.
Yep.
And those docks are nonstop creaking and popping and making noise, and the waves are rocking them up and down. There's
some great southern Missouri lakes that are very clear. A lot of people dive. And I had a friend of mine who's actually a guest on the show before. I think it was Jody who was telling me that, Jody Hughes. He said he used to go out and they would put crawdads in a bag and they would dive, but they'd just pick up 2 rocks and they would just bang the rocks together. And those smallies would just come right in. They'd take crawdads out and let them swim up in the water, and they'd just snatch them right there, and they'd feed these smallies while they were down there. It's cool. And that's going to kind of take us into like one of our following weeks when we start talking about rattles and and applying rattles and what they mean and how they do it, because we're 52 minutes in, we got about 8 minutes left, and that's we're not going to get into rattles.
You got another question?
No, actually, we've got great people watching, but nobody wants to ask anything.
Anybody in the crowd?
So it's all good.
Anybody got a question?
Do what? I already answered them. I'm good.
Any of you guys got a question?
Roll.
Something you want? We're just trying to give everybody what they want.
Yeah, I don't know. That's
the whole idea in the show.
Exactly.
We don't want to.
You said high tech stuff. You're talking about side imagery.
That's right.
You're a dinosaur,
and I
dude.
just said it. I didn't want to go into it at all, but but we do. We have to every now and then. It's the wave of the future. It's happening.
Danny, I don't know what that means. Danny sent one in that says, dominant fish theory, do you think they see the reflection? Oh, maybe of swimmers. Maybe he's talking about swimmers.
See the reflection.
Of other, like, you see a reflection of people up top, and I don't know what that means. You have to clarify it.
Yeah.
And of course, Stick wants to know how's the golf game. That's the question he asked, how's the golf game?
We shot even this last week.
Really?
Yeah.
So it was the best ball?
Yeah.
It
wasn't me. No,
it wasn't. Yeah,
no,
I was
not
going to
just
say
me.
it couldn't have been you. So.
No, we played in a scramble and we shot even.
Gotcha.
But there was somebody that shot a 56 that day too. So.
Gotcha. So this week we're gonna log off here in a little bit. Got any advice for anybody that's going to go out this week and fish these kind of waters?
Just don't get discouraged if you pull up on 2 points and you don't get a bite. Just keep moving. Keep moving around. Hunt, peck around. Don't spend an hour on a point. Spend 10 minutes.
Right. You said that last week too.
Yeah.
So don't spend a lot of time. They're either there or they're not there.
Yeah. And the ones that are biting too. I mean, you don't want to sit there and even if you do see them on your locators and stuff like that, if they're not biting, move on. Don't worry about just keep moving.
Hey, Stick says you want me on the show next week.
Oh well, my
gosh, come on, Stick, yeah.
There we go.
Yes, Mr. Steven, we'd love to have you on the show next week. Why don't you just let me know, confirm, and we'll have one of the Baitworks guys.
That's right.
On the show next week. Just say the word, buddy, you're in.
Stick. A lot of people don't know Steven Strijic, but Steven Strijic has been in this industry as long as anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, his whole life, from the time he walked up to my dad when he was about 10 years old and held out a hat for him to get an autograph. And, my dad started calling him Stick because he was like 6'2" when he was like 10 years old, and weighed about 100 pounds,
he says I'll be there.
Oh,
so there you go, guys. Next week we have got
show.
a special treat, Steven. How do you even say his last name?
Strejic.
Strejic.
And he'll tell us
Call him
stories
Stick. That's going to be some good stuff.
he's got some stories that I don't need out there.
We'll have to sell tickets for that show.
That's right.
It's going to be good. Hey, your wife sent a question and said, "What's the meaning of life?"
What's the meaning of life? Wow.
Yep. I actually have an answer for that.
Do you?
I do.
Well, let's hear your answer.
So I had one of my best friends in high school passed away last week, and he had cancer. It took him about 11 weeks, and he passed. And it's okay, but it was kind of strange. He sent his final message on Facebook. He knew he was dying. He was in the hospital, and he put a Facebook, and it was very long. But basically, he said the meaning of life was to forgive, to be kind, and explore the world.
Huh.
And I thought, not bad. That's pretty good. So there you go. So there you go, Amy. That's what I took.
Pretty
this
well
week.
thought out.
It was. Question: Is there an area of the lake that is fishing better with all the current? Is the upper or lower end being more productive this time? I think it's the lower myself, but we've seen some pretty big numbers come in tournaments this last couple weeks.
The Wednesday nighters and stuff like that, a lot of those are being won up the lake. And when I say up the lake, up to the Niangua, so up that direction.
Let's break this down. Let's talk about it nationwide. What's typically better nationally in current? Is it an upper end river system, or is it a big body of water, or is it
normally the upper,
or is that just a bait presence question?
Normally the upper end is smaller areas. Mm-hmm. You have less points on the upper ends of the lakes a lot of times because it's more of a river, so straight shorelines, miles of straight shorelines. Where on the low end of Lake of the Ozarks, you have a million points. Right. There's points everywhere you look. So when you go up the river, up the lake to the upper end, you have less points. Well, guess what? That makes it a little bit easier to fish.
Right. Well, so with that being said, let's go back to something you said earlier. You said don't spend a lot of time on a point.
That's right.
Now, if you're on the lower end, because there's so many of them, then don't spend as much time. However, do you kind of want to change your story there on the upper end and you spend a little more time?
Not really. If they're there, they're biting right now. If they're on a point and you want to be there to catch them, they're going to do it within a cast or two. They're going to let you know as soon as you get there. Okay. If they're not, keep moving. Okay. Now, you might hit that point 30 minutes from now, and they're biting. So that's the only problem. If it's a favorite point of yours, be sure and hit it a couple times, 2 or 3 times through the day. Okay. But no, I kind of prefer the upper end of the lake because it's a smaller puzzle. There's less places to hit. And you're going to land on one of them that they're feeding, they're eating, so just keep moving.
Another question is, what's the best dock foam to fish on the lake? And that's kind of a loaded question because they've regulated foam now, so everything's supposed to be black and encapsulated. Yeah. But
if you can still find that old styrofoam, that's pretty good because it holds algae growing on it. Yep. Algae's what the reason for it. If you get new foam, you got to give it a few years to get that algae gunk on it because that's what the shad feed on.
I'll have to add, as somebody who loves to fish docks, I like to fish chatterbaits and spinnerbaits and crankbaits around docks. It depends on the time of year too.
Sure.
A lot of times in the fall, I'll like a dock that's when the lake drops down. It's at the shallowest where a black foam can heat up the quickest.
Yep.
Those fish can get up underneath there, and we can have a whole show basically.
We can have a whole show on styrofoam
on how heat and color and docks and depth and different times a year, and we probably will because
I believe in the
we do this every week. So that's a good question, and we'll go into depth on that later. But
that's just another one of those little keys that on any given day that black foam warms up good.
That's right. Right. And depending on the time of the year, there's a lot of factors there, but that's a whole can of information in itself. So that's
you get in the water and you reach down and you touch the black foam that's facing the sun, and it's physically warm.
Yeah.
You touch the black foam that's in the shade, it's 10 degrees cooler.
That's right.
It depends on the time of the year.
So all I can say is, Matt, stay tuned. We'll have a whole episode on foam because that's a good. I'm going to make a note. I'm going to put it on my styrofoam tray. Dock foam show.
I hope you don't use that to sell meat on or anything.
No, I'm not selling meat.
Okay.
And this is a brand new one. It's not unused.
That could be like a trophy deal there. You got pictures going on it. You have way too much time.
I was doodling, so I put on there to make sure that.
Is that one of my long answers?
KRMS 32. I actually had some stuff here we didn't cover, and we'll talk about this another day about fishing by yourself. you
Yeah.
know, in tournaments. Um, the phenomenon of water of fish all being in the same depth. It happens in certain times of year on certain lakes that when you get big current like this and things happen, sometimes those fish will. It could be a thermocline thing, it could
Sure.
be a current thing, but those fish will all get in the same shot in the water, and it's a weird thing, but that's a whole nother show.
Yep.
So that's you know, honest to goodness, 1 hour and 1 minute.
Sweet.
We're done,
That was
buddy.
perfect.
It was. So I'd like to thank everybody for putting in. We had a great turnout tonight. It was a good show.
Hope everybody watching
Yeah.
enjoyed it.
Go out there and fish and be safe and put your kill switch on. Wear your life jackets when the big motor's running. As always, this is James Bryan along with Dion Hibden. Anything else? We
Nope.
didn't even talk about Fisherman of the Week. We didn't talk about Shameless Plug.
No, we skip right by it.
I think we just
And that's
skipped it
okay.
tonight. Yeah. So we'll talk about a bunch of products and stuff next week. How's that?
It's real unfiltered.
It is.
So
Guys,
we don't have a plan.
we appreciate y'all watching. Thanks again for watching Real Unfiltered Talk. We'll see you again the same time, same place next week at 6 p.m. And thanks again for coming. Appreciate it, guys. Have a good night.